You are listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for Auburn and the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul.
Kurt, Nate, Coach Staff, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Lutz and Kirkland. Touchdown, Auburn!
Think about it. It's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
They have the most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown, Tiger.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everyone, and yes, it's Wednesday. You know what that means. It's the Recruiting Roundup, and today, as usual, every 2 weeks, we are joined by recruiting insider, personal friend of the show, one of the most knowledgeable guys around. That's Phillip Dukes. You can find him at Dukes the Scoop on Twitter. Dukes, what's up, bro?
Hey, not much. Just enjoying my day in Atlanta and enjoying myself for the Jboy Show once again.
Definitely. We're always glad to get you here, man. And there's been some movement, in the recruiting landscape in this dimension that we're living in. And I want to jump right into it. And everybody, Smile Munden's been a guy we've talked about a bunch on this show, and a guy whose recruitment that, you followed and a ton of people followed, and you kind of have an interesting perspective in it. What do you think? Where does it stand with Smile as of today?
I think Smile is in a position where he gets to call his own shot, as I've said before. I think Tennessee has been firmly in the lead for a while, in my opinion, from what I'm hearing. I've also heard that Auburn is in a very, very good position based on his relationship with T. Will. Florida has been making moves based on his relationship with C-Rob, a former linebacker at Georgia. And Georgia, who's been the presumed favorite for quite a while, has recently ramped up their efforts. I have heard that he's had personal conversations with Kirby Smart, and that they are definitely trying to ramp up their efforts to try to keep one of the top linebackers in the country at home, especially with the fact that they lost out on Barrett Carter, and with Barrett Carter being at Clemson, which is one of those schools that just doesn't get a lot of decommits. If Clemson gets you in their grasp, so you can almost bet on it that they're going to be there. So the optics that go along with losing 2 of the top linebackers in the country to out-of-state teams is something that has Georgia worrying. They've also started to ramp up their efforts with other inside and outside linebacker recruits, such as Javon Dumas-Johnson out of Maryland or the D.C. area. From what I think it's Maryland, D.C., somewhere up there in the northeast.
Yeah, I think it's up in PG County, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So, definitely having an impact on Munden's recruitment as far as understanding that, hey, there is a chance that, and this is from UGA's perspective, that there is a chance that Munden may not be coming to Georgia. And I think that it's a real and I do feel that Auburn has a real shot with Smile.
Yeah, and I think that's the question being asked because, again, any type caliber player of a Small Munden who we've said before he thinks the number one linebacker in this class, obviously you're going to want to keep him in state, but Auburn's really making an effort and put themselves in a good position, like you said. And moving on to a guy that, is a huge target for Auburn. Everybody's, thinking he's a UGA lean. We put out something that I think this is Auburn's best recruiting job. That doesn't mean they're going to get him. And that's Amarius Mims, the 5-star offensive tackle. Oh, what have you kind of heard on Amarius lately?
I've heard that he's going back and forth. He likes different situations. He likes the situation that he has in Tennessee, the amount of love he's been getting on social media. He likes the coaching staff at Alabama, and he likes the opportunity to play at Auburn. I think that one good sign that we do have going in our favor as Auburn fans would be the fact that he has not ceased any communication with Big Neil, no matter how much he's going towards Georgia, no matter how much he's being presumed as a lean towards Alabama or Tennessee. The communication, from what I hear, has still been very, very strong with Big Neil. and that we do have a puncher's chance. Now, that being said, with him being such a high-level target, I don't think that anybody is going to cease or see any of their efforts in his recruitment at this point in time. So I think that August 15th, which I believe is his date to commit,
yes, it is.
There's going to be some fireworks. And I think he's going to keep that pretty close to the vest from what I do hear about him, that he is the type of guy that likes to keep people engaged, and he's very into social media. So those are things that I think that are going to play into his decision. And I think that it's going to be one that we may not get in, that we may see a couple of smoke screens before we actually get the real answer.
Definitely. And again, just because he commits on August 15th, again, signing day until February, but who knows this year, and also you have the early signing period, of course, but he's a guy that it's so hard to get a player out of Bleckley County not to go to Georgia. But you brought up the communication and that he's been very open and very responsive to Coach Bicknell. As a former coach, that's the main thing. As long as they're responsive, you feel like you have a chance because you can talk to them and really try and see where they're at. Can you kind of talk about just how good of a job Coach Bicknell's done? Because, I'm hearing things from other schools about, just how fierce this guy is on the trail.
Yeah, I heard that Bicknell has a very, very good eye for evaluation, and that the guys that he likes, they're going to be some of those larger guys or larger that we've traditionally recruited in Auburn history over the past couple of years. I think that his eye for evaluation and his tenacity as far as going after what he wants and not just what is being told that he should have is something that is boding very well for Auburn's chances with multiple high-level recruits. I also feel that, like I said previously on the show before, the type of guys that he's recruiting are the type of guys that can lean on you when you need that 4th and 1, that you're not really having to do a whole lot of jet sweeps or the pulling plays.
Yeah.
That, hey, we need this 4th and 1. We're not going to trick you. We're going to line up, but we're going to lean.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that I'm very, very excited about for the coming season.
Yeah, and it's making your layups, being able to get 3rd and 1 by turning around and handing the ball off, or quarterback sneaking like I, am a huge fan of. But kind of moving on, another really high prospect guy that's huge on a lot of teams' boards is Jeremiah Scooby Williams. We reported on this show. We've talked about it multiple times that we believe Auburn's in a really good position here. I know he's a guy that the Auburn staff really covets.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Not a whole lot of movement from what I'm hearing, but I have heard that the communication is still very strong. The relationship with Gus is still very strong. I have heard multiple times that there may be a move coming with Oklahoma. There's also been a move coming with Florida. I think that the Florida is more of a real possibility than the Oklahoma move. And what I will say is a lot of times you have to be careful at how much you read into a tweet from a recruit, because as we saw with multiple situations, they can be used as smoke screens, and sometimes they could be something as a foretelling type nature. So
exactly.
I think not to get too caught up in those type deals, but yes, I have heard that Auburn is still in a really good position. From multiple people in the know, I've heard that it's going to be very, very hard to get him out of state. But if he were to get out of state, I was hearing that it could be, and possibly most likely, Florida if he were to leave the state.
Okay.
But I try not to make predictions, but I do have a very good feeling about this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think me and you are on the same page. And moving on to another guy that we've talked about multiple times and is another very high prospect guy, that's Xavier Sori, the linebacker, D-lineman hybrid that just transferred to IMG. And I believe you talked about him. He reported, didn't he? You were the one, I think, that broke that.
Yeah, so last weekend, Sori reported to IMG, which is one of the things that Auburn wasn't really worried about as far as him going to IMG, as far as the amount of development that he would get. But I think the more pressing factor that worries Auburn is the amount of UGA and Florida recruits that are currently enrolled at IMG. So it'll be the team recruiting more so than the coaches that they're worried about. Not to say that the relationships that he has built with with coaches, that position coaches and area recruiters at other schools isn't going to be a factor, but I think that Auburn is very confident that T. Will, also the area recruiter, Coach Al Poe, they've been doing a great job as far as keeping communication open with him. But it's going to really come down to where he feels the most comfortable. There are multiple reports saying that the guys from Georgia, Lavasse, am I saying that right?
Yeah. I think it's Lavasse Carroll, the running back, correct? Yeah.
Right. Good relationship with him. They've been going back and forth on Twitter a lot. Also, Kamar Wilcoxon, it's a guy that's pushing him to Florida. So if you notice, you'll see a lot of guys that banter back and forth on Twitter. But from what I'm hearing, Auburn does have a legitimate shot at Sawyer. But I do think that Alabama is not out of it. They have been a presumed leader for a long, long time. But I think the team to beat right now for Sawyer, if I had to bet on it, would be either Georgia or Florida.
Yeah, and again, I've heard Florida a little bit, and two, looking at Alabama's depth chart, just with the amount of linebackers they've gotten, and some of them they'll put their hand in the ground, but I wonder when the depth chart's going to start playing a factor there. With you got guys like Ian Jackson committed to Alabama, Deontay Lawson, I believe, obviously out of Blount High School down there in Mobile with Lee Hunter. But kind of moving on to another guy in Birmingham before we kind of get a little out of state here, and that's JaQuincy McKinstry. Everybody knows him as Kool-Aid. He's a guy that keeps everything close to the vest. I know he likes LSU, but just everything in me tells me it's going to be an in-state battle, and he's a guy that maybe they can kind of see doing a few different things.
Yeah, so what I was hearing about McKinstry is that they love him at corner, but his athleticism just allows you to do so many things outside of just playing the traditional cornerback role. You can use him as a safety. He could play the nickel. And I've had recent rumblings hearing that he could potentially be a guy that gets the ball in his hands at Auburn.
Yeah.
So Auburn is looking at different routes as far as recruiting him. And it's not just something. It's not pie in the sky. I mean, they literally like how he looks with the ball in his hand, the way he catches the ball, and when he gets the ball in his hand, he makes things happen. So I think that that's something that has been going on recently. I'm not sure how long, but I've definitely heard rumblings lately about McKinstry or Kool-Aid, however you want to call it, that Auburn is looking at finding ways to get the ball in his hand during his recruitment, and that just the fact that he's such a supreme athlete is one of the reasons that they're not just trying to pigeonhole him as a cornerback, but also saying, hey, we like you here, but there's no limit to what you could do if you were to step on the planes.
Exactly. And again, you have a guy you played with, Bo Nix, that would be throwing him the ball. So you already kind of got some chemistry there. And I'm sure that Auburn's going to use that in recruiting. But going down the list, looking at a guy that we've predicted that's going to end up at Auburn. He's currently committed to Ole Miss. I actually talked to him today. Just want to hit on him for a second. We got him coming on the show next week, and that's Adonai Mitchell. He's a 3-star. I think he's a guy that's going to end up being a 4-star. 6'3", 190, lanky receiver that can play inside and out. What are your thoughts on Adonai Mitchell, and do you see any movement coming soon in that one?
I think that he is a guy that wants to come to Auburn. I think that Auburn wishes that he would commit a little sooner than later, but I think that they haven't wavered in their confidence as far as him actually being a part of Auburn's class. But in order to be in Auburn's class, first he has to decommit from Ole Miss.
Exactly.
So I think there should be some movement coming, and you can't. And once again, you can't really say what will happen. You can say how people feel at a certain time. You can say that we feel really good about this, because you got to think, if I have this information and if you have this information, you better believe Ole Miss also has this information.
They know. They've known.
So of course they're going to ramp up. If he felt at one point in time that he was so confident in his decision that he would have committed to Ole Miss, don't think that Ole Miss isn't pushing for a recommitment or a solidification of that commitment. So I think that it's one of those things that you want to be cautiously optimistic about. The tea leaves have been reading towards Auburn for a long time, but just think about how long we've been talking about this situation, and there hasn't been any movement.
Yeah.
So I would say I don't think that Auburn is wavering in their confidence, but I will also say that Auburn is being cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, and until you push the button, the missile doesn't fire. So, again, that's something I think everybody's kind of on pins and needles for. So, another guy that's actually going to make a decision here, I believe, this Saturday in 4 days, and that's Cameron Kinchins. He's a guy, he's a really good player. I know there's a lot of different things out there. Kind of what are you hearing on him?
I'm hearing that Auburn likes where they are, but I'm also hearing that the University of Miami likes where they are.
Yeah.
I think that it will come down between those two schools. If I were to be a betting man, I would bet on one of the two. I think Auburn feels really good about their position, but the University of Miami is doing a really good job of preaching to Florida kids that they want to kind of rebuild the crib, so to speak, or and for those who don't know, the crib is what they call it in South Florida. Say, okay, where you're from is the crib.
Yep.
So their new campaign is, hey, stay at the crib, rebuild the crib. So there are a lot of guys in Florida who are buying into that notion. And I think that right now you can flip a coin and be just as accurate as any recruiting prognosticator in the game right now as far as where Cameron Kinchens is going.
I agree 100%. And if anybody doesn't know, he's the safety, 5'11", 201. He's a 4-star on 247 composite. He's out of Miami Northwestern. And, it's one of those deals where he's got a bunch of teammates, I think, that are committed to Miami. And, peer pressure is a real thing, especially in that area. Like you said, they're really pushing the narrative, stay at home, which is a big deal, especially, if they've got prominent people in their corner. So that's one to definitely keep an eye on. And like you said, it's a coin flip right now. We haven't put out a prediction just because, we don't put out predictions that we don't know. So that's one to keep an eye on. And another guy, we actually talked about Kool-Aid being able to do different things. But there's a guy that me and you talked about in the pre-show, and you brought up something I think is very interesting, and he's committed to Arkansas right now. That's linebacker Raheem Sanders. But could Auburn maybe be looking at him to do something else?
Right. So I have heard that there has been some film review of Raheem Rocket Sanders' film from his junior year. And just seeing his natural ability with the ball being that big, 6'2", 225, they did look at how he catches the ball, how he attacks the ball, and what he can do when the ball gets in his hand. They do see him as a potential weapon. So if there were to be a situation where Auburn needed to circle back, I'm hearing that Rocket Sanders doesn't care where he plays, but he would love to be able to catch the ball on the next level. And he's primarily being recruited as a linebacker / athlete. But I do think schools that would offer him an opportunity to be a wide receiver, especially if it came from a bigger brand or a more traditionally powerful team than Arkansas, then they may be able to get his John Hancock come December. So, and then we also have to remember too, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is Raheem Sanders has really only been playing football for a year.
Yeah, that's something we talked about that last time too. That's crazy.
Right. So all of this hoopla, and he's really been a basketball player. So that fluidity, his ability to change directions is something that could lend to his prowess as a receiver. Now, not saying that he's going to get an offer as a receiver, not saying that he will be circled back, that we will circle back to Raheem Sanders. Right now, he's committed to Arkansas. There has been a line of communication that stayed open between him and our linebackers coach, T. Will, from what I hear. But I will say that it has been kicked around the table about potentially bringing him into another room besides the linebacker room.
Yeah, and again, you know how kids are. Anybody that tells you they wouldn't want to touch the ball in their hands are lying to you, at least 95%. So, again, will it happen? Who knows? But that's an interesting avenue that's kind of opened up. And again, you talk about, him only playing a year, his ceiling, who knows what his ceiling is. It may click and he may end up being a superstar, especially with that frame. But kind of winding down here, speaking of superstars, 5-star Jason Marshall, the DB out of Palmetto down in Florida. He's a guy that I know Auburn's been recruiting hard. You were talking a little bit about him in the pre-show, me and you were. What's the situation there? Because, he's unreal.
Yeah, so Jason Marshall is a guy that Auburn really likes. They stepped up their recruiting efforts even after he put out a top 3 that didn't include Auburn. They do feel like as early as it is in the signing season that they could make a potential impact in his recruitment. They haven't stopped. Larry Porter is an absolute beast in that area. He's very familiar with the area as his time as a head coach, not only as a special teams coordinator. So we've got a good guy in the fight. I will say that I can't say that he is automatically going to add Auburn to his top 3 or top 5, but I can say that we are making a strong push. That he's somebody that Auburn likes a lot, and he's been receptive to the conversation, and it's something to keep your eye on.
Definitely, and he's one that if Auburn could sneak that one out would be absolutely huge. But last couple guys here, and I want to talk a little special teams before I let you go. A guy that we've talked about, actually talked about with Tay a few weeks ago, and that's Rod Orr out of Gadsden, the huge, I believe, 6'7", 300-pound offensive tackle, offensive lineman out of Gadsden down there in Alabama. And is he a guy that Auburn's waiting on Amarius Mims to make a decision? Because I'm pretty sure he'd commit if offered, correct?
That's something that I wouldn't be able to say with 100% confidence. What I will say is it's something that he's a guy that Auburn has seriously evaluated. They see a lot of positive things that can work out in Auburn's system. And I think there are more targets that play into the fact of him having a committable offer at this time. I'm not and it could have changed. The narrative could have changed in the past week from the last time I've heard anything. So that's one that I wouldn't want to kind of put my stamp on, saying, hey, I know this, I don't know that. But definitely he's a guy that I am 100% positive we've done an extensive evaluation on and that Big Neil cares a lot about as far as recruiting. So I think that that's definitely another situation to watch.
Yeah, I got a buddy down there that coached high school forever, and he was telling me, there's a lot of Auburn love in Gadsden right now for Rod. But again, that's one we'll come back on. But last one before, like I said, we talk some special teams. A guy that's been committed to Auburn for a while. He's 6'7", 350. That's Jamarian Gooch out of Seymour, Tennessee. You have an update on him, because I know he's a guy who's a 3-star, but there's a lot of ability and a really big body there.
Yeah, so when I talked about the size of the recruits of the offensive line recruits that Big Neil has been targeting, he's one of the guys who personifies that conversation at 100%. I think that Gooch is a guy that really would like to stay closer to home if possible. And I think that if the best situation was at Tennessee, he would go to the University of Tennessee. I think that Big Neil did such a good job early on of recruiting him before he started to get more of the calls and more of the high-level recruiter actions that some of the schools have been putting on him lately boded very well in Auburn being able to secure that commitment as early as they did. Now, being that he did commit as early as he did, there comes that time where things may run a little cold or communication may not be as consistent as it was and guys start to waver. I think that one school that has kind of picked up their efforts as far as when it comes to Jamarian Gooch has been UGA from what I'm hearing. UGA is making a strong push for him as well as at the University of Tennessee. So this is just one of those deals where it goes back to the stars where you say, hey, he may not be the highest ranked guy, but he's getting the same amount of pressure. It's not like a guy that we just got in our class just because, oh, yeah, he's a guy we just need to fill a spot. No, he's a guy that we wanted. He's a guy that's a long-term developmental prospect and that does have a high, potentially professional ceiling as far as his frame goes and his footwork. So I think that he's a guy that we definitely need to keep in the class, that we want to keep in the class, and that the movement by the other two schools, University of Tennessee and the University of Georgia, just speaks for the type of prospect that we did get in our evaluation early on.
Yeah, exactly. And when you see a guy that's that big, most of the time they're waist benders or they have trouble moving. He has really good feet. He's flexible in his hips. He's able to bend, which is something that, is really rare to find in a body that big. He's got kind of a basketball type body, and that's what you want, that length and that reach. So when they pass set, they're able to punch and they extend where it doesn't close down the pocket, or they're able to be strong enough to extend and be able to sit down. So I wouldn't be surprised if his ranking went up. I think if there were some camps this summer and he could have moved around and been in front of some cameras, I think it'd have probably moved up already. But again, great work, Dukes, on the recruiting front as usual, man. It's top-notch stuff. But I want to talk a little analysis here with you, and this is something we're going to add to the end of every episode where you come on, and that's a little bit of special team stuff. What are you kind of hearing? I coached it for 9 years, was a coordinator for 7, and I love talking about it. What are you kind of hearing on that front for Auburn going into this 2020 season?
Well, I'm hearing preliminarily 3 guys that you could expect to see a major impact from on special teams. And when I say a major impact, the amount of special team snaps usually bodes well for the amount of real snaps or amount of play snaps, offensive and defensive snaps that you'll play in the future. So I think 3 guys to keep an eye on would be Ladarius Tennyson, KJ Britt, and Wesley Steiner, not based off of what they've done in Auburn, but based off of their profile, based off of the scheme, the special team scheme that Auburn does run on their separate coverages. I think that those are 3 guys that really could fill those roles in a great way and kind of replace some of the guys that we lost last year.
Yeah, and again, I think it's something where you look at Auburn and the coverage wasn't great, and when Auburn's been good, and you look at all these teams that win, special teams is a third of the game, and Aaron Sipsis did a good job, punting, and Auburn's typically, Anders had a good year, kicking the ball. I know he probably wished his percentage was higher, but he made some huge kicks against Bama. Who do you think right now, Dukes, is going to be the punter?
Bo Nix.
Run away. They asked me that on the radio the other day. No, Dukes, this is hilarious. They asked me that on the radio, and I said if that was a legitimate option, and I said you will see that when they have to drag Chad Morris and Gus Malzahn out by their throats screaming from the complex.
Right, definitely. I mean, actually, we have no idea who the punter's going to be. I know we have a guy that's there, but there's also been some multiple reports about, maybe we'll get another guy from Australia, but with the COVID situation, I'm not sure how well that will really work out. And your guess is as good as mine. I no matter how hard I try to shake that tree, nothing's falling out. So,
yeah, man. I get asked that question probably 5 times a day. And, I've heard, the grad transfer, like you said, another guy from down under. But, that's a position that's very important. And I'm sure, the coaches want to get that filled as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I just think we're in such a weird time. It's just one of those things where the resources have been limited. But I definitely believe that they're working on something, because there's no way that Gus Malzahn, who's such a technician when it comes to the nuances of the game, would allow one of those, something that huge and something that impactful, to impact us in a negative way this year.
Yeah, I agree 100%. They'll get an answer to it. But Dukes, man, tell everybody where they can find you. You're a must follow on Twitter, man, and a huge friend of the show.
Follow me at dukesthescoop.com. Or actually, at Dukes the Scoop. I might have did a little bit of foreshadowing there.
Hey,
but no,
listen,
right now,
don't act like you didn't do that on purpose.
No. But no, seriously, follow me at Dukes the Scoop on Twitter. Saturdays, Sundays, sometimes I get really active and I put out some good recruiting notes. So if you want to have a good time on Twitter, a couple of polls, just follow me and we'll take it from there.
Definitely, man. Well, it's always firecracker stuff. Can't wait to have you back on, man. You're one of my favorites, and we'll talk soon.
I'm so, man. Take it easy.
That was one of the top recruiting insiders for Auburn, Phillip Dukes, a.k.a. Dukes the Scoop on Twitter. Make sure you follow him. Jam-packed full of information, as usual. You guys know where to come, and it's free. Again, remember, you can subscribe. You can donate to us. You can see it on our homepage if you click on the link. Remember, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at The Jboy Show. On YouTube, make sure you subscribe. It's The Jboy Show page. Again, you guys make this whole show. We're going to keep doing it, keep having amazing guests, keep having amazing content and intel you can't find anywhere else. As usual, thanks to the Investor Brand Network. Shout out to Faison, Harry Potter in the studio. Again, catch us tomorrow. You're going to like what you hear. It's Nyland Green. He's going to reveal some information that I think a certain fan base, maybe 2 fan bases, if you kind of look at it in an interesting way, will like. So make sure you catch that. We'll let you know when we release that tomorrow. But it's another edition of the Jboy Show with the recruiting roundup. And Jboy's going. Gone.